The opening words are a poem which I found in this wonderful anthology of poetry called How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope, edited by James Cruz. And this poem, which is written as a response or in reply to a line from Jack Kerouac, which is at the top of your order of service, silence is the golden mountain. Listen, turn everything off. When the noise in our lives drifts away, when the chatter of our minds sinks into that perfect lake of nothing, then, oh, then we can apprehend that golden mountain, always there, waiting for us to be still enough to hear it.
Good morning. Welcome to our choir, some of the parents who've dropped their kids off at our faith development, and to all the folks joining us via Zoom. Welcome to worship this morning. It is really good to be back in this room, though it is also very good when we can all be together outside. There are many different kinds of good ways to gather these days, and none of them perfect, but I think we're moving in the right direction. I'm really glad you've joined us this morning, whether you are a long-time regular, whether you are joining from afar via Zoom, whether you're checking us out. Welcome to this community of care, this community of exploration. I'm Reverend Annie Gonzalez, Minister of Faith Development, and I have a couple announcements this morning. One announcement, as you may know, we are going to have in here, part of the reason that we are in here and not outdoors is due to the fact that it's hard to put the organ outside. We tried, but it didn't go well, and there's going to be, in fact, an organ concert following worship at 11:30 a.m. with our new organist, Sandra Labarge Newman. So we're very excited to have her with us, and we really hope you'll join for the concert at 11:30. You can join here in person up to our current capacity of 60 people in the sanctuary, and you can also join on Zoom right here on this link. You don't have to go anywhere else, so please do attend. The other announcements I have come from the Environmental Justice Committee. The first is relevant to everyone, though, and that is that there will be a First Parish semi-annual meeting on Sunday, November 14th. And so among the things that we'll do at that semi-annual meeting is to talk about an article regarding divestment from fossil fuels in our endowment, which we have done a lot of so far and want to make a clear public statement about it. And so if you want to learn more about that before the meeting, so you can be a very informed voter and participate in our fifth principle, then you can come on Wednesday to a Zoom meeting at 7:30 p.m. on October 20th to learn more, ask questions, and make informed decisions. And also from the Environmental Justice Committee, our Earth Connections program continues. We have a monthly faith development program that is focused on connecting with the earth and the book Braiding Sweetgrass. And this will be an experiential program. It will be an edible nature walk. And that will be next Sunday, October 24th in the afternoon. And we'll be joining Russ Cohen, a naturalist who specializes in foraging and knowing what is edible in our surroundings. And it will be at Lincoln Park in Lexington. And so please do join there's information on email and Facebook, but you can also go to tinyurl.com/earthconnect2 and find the information and RSVP, as it will be a limited number that can be accommodated. And so with that, I would invite you to rise as makes sense for you in your body to join in our Unison Affirmation we say each Sunday. We'll say it in English and we'll say it in Spanish. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros.
One of the very sad things about not having the service outside and not all being able to gather inside is that we're missing the presence of our children, and that is a sadness for me. Instead of a time for all ages, we're going to have a time for all ages. This is a reading, but it's taken from this wonderful book called The Rabbit Listened, which some of you may know. And I suppose I'm sharing it as a kind of a parable or teaching story this morning. One day, Taylor decided to build something new, something special, something amazing. Taylor was so proud, but then, out of nowhere, things came crashing down. The chicken was the first to notice. Cluck, 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 cluck. What a shame. I'm so sorry this has happened. Let's talk about it. Cluck, cluck, cluck. But Taylor didn't feel like talking, so the chicken went away. Next came the bear. Roar, roar, how horrible. I bet you feel so angry. Roar, let's shout about it. Roar, roar. But Taylor didn't feel like shouting, so the bear left. The elephant knew just what to do. Trumpeter, I can fix this. We just need to remember exactly the way things were. But Taylor didn't feel like remembering, so the elephant left. One by one they came. The hyena, let's laugh about it. The ostrich, gulp, let's hide and pretend nothing happened. The kangaroo, tisk, tisk, what a mess, let's just throw it all away. And the snake, shh, let's go knock down someone else's. But Taylor didn't feel like doing anything with anybody. So eventually they all left until Taylor was alone. In the quiet, Taylor didn't even notice the rabbit. But it moved closer and closer until Taylor could feel its warm body. Together they sat in silence until Taylor said, "Please stay with me." The rabbit listened. The rabbit listened as Taylor talked. The rabbit listened as Taylor shouted. The rabbit listened as Taylor remembered and laughed. The rabbit listened to Taylor's plans to hide, to throw everything away, to ruin something for someone else. Through it all, the rabbit never left. And when the time was right, the rabbit listened to Taylor's plan to build again. "I can't wait," Taylor said. "It's going to be amazing."
Good morning, everyone. Oh my gosh, I just counted. There are 40 people here because of the choir, the tech crew, the ministers, the keyboard players, and that's all I get is, "Good morning." You know, I listened to it on Zoom. You can't really hear you. So I'm going to say good morning again. And when you say good morning, don't say it to me, but say it to everybody out there in Zoom land. Good morning.
Good morning.
Did everybody hear that? So this morning is very special when I brought the choir in for this service. As Annie said, we can't take the organ outside. And it's not the organist's fault, by the way. It's hard to dismantle this and carry it out onto the common. But the choir, while they were singing this morning, I was conducting them and I started to cry. And why, of course, did I start to cry? It's pretty obvious. It's the idea that we're able to be in this space, and we know not everyone can be in this space, and we've got to keep working for that. We've got to keep working together and to come together not only as a community, but in the wider town of Bedford and beyond. And this is a very special place for that. You know, I feel safe here. I feel safe with this community, and I want it to continue. And the way for that to happen is for the offering. Please give generously.
I've been hearing people talk all week about how much they love the music program at this congregation, and I totally understand why. Thank you, choir. You are wonderful. Thank you, Sandra and Steve and Brad. I have a second brief reading for you this morning, and this is from an interview that Thich Nhat Hanh did with Oprah Winfrey. And he was talking about deep listening. He said, deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of another person. You can call it compassionate listening. You listen with only one purpose, to help him or her or them or they, to help empty their heart. Even if they say things that are full of wrong perceptions, full of bitterness, you are still capable of continuing to listen with compassion. Because you know that listening like that, you give that person a chance to suffer less. If you want to help them to correct their perception, you wait for another time. For now, you don't interrupt, you don't argue. If you do, they lose their chance. You just listen with compassion and help them to suffer less. 1 hour like that can bring transformation and healing. May we all be so fortunate to be listened to in this way when we need it most. So you may not be able to see it. You probably can't see it on Zoom, and you probably can't see it well from here, but I chose this morning to wear my chicken stole. And you may be wondering why. But on this side it says, "As a hen gathers her chicks, so I long to gather you." And it just felt really appropriate, that verse from the Gospel of Matthew this morning. I long to gather us all, as many of us who wish to gather in person, together in one place, and I hope that time will come soon. This spring, when I received the invitation to become your interim minister, I was honored and excited and delighted, and I also found myself wondering why on earth the search committee had chosen me. I wondered this not because I felt like I lacked the skill or the experience or the training, I wondered this simply because I'm so very unlike John. Right? I don't preach like him. I don't lead like him. I don't supervise like him. I don't do pastoral care in the same way that he did. We have different styles. I imagine that some of you are longing still for things to continue to be as they had been. Dynamic and exciting and innovative and surprising. And while I'm always sorry to be the bearer of what might be disappointing news, I often find in my role that I am. Things around here may not feel the same way, at least not for now. And that's not because I don't love innovation and excitement and surprise. It's because interim ministry is meant to be a little bit different. A different season, a time to pause, a time to rest and regroup and renew and review. It is not meant to be a time for new beginnings and exciting new projects, although that time will come again. For now, there is work to be done, and it is important work, essential even, but it's not always work of the dynamic and exciting sort. In some ways, it's more akin to house inspections or car inspections. It's a time for checking things out. It's a time for looking under the hood or in the basement or in the attic, checking out the foundation and the tires. How are the systems working, we ask? How strong is the base that all this is riding on or standing on? Is there anything that needs some attention, some work, some TLC, before the next minister gets in the car or moves into the house? Now, of course, congregations are not houses or cars, and the work of the interim season is not nearly so mechanistic, but in the beginning, it can feel that dull. Congregations are communities, and communities mean people, and so my work as an interim begins not with looking at mechanical systems, but looking at human systems. And that work begins with listening, which is an essential interim skill. And fortunately, listening is something that I'm pretty good at. I've been planning since late September, when the newsletter deadline arrived, to preach this morning on the topic of listening. And you may recall, if you read The Parishioner when it came out, that I'd shared a title and a description of one kind of a sermon on listening. And then sometime this week, I decided that I want to preach a different kind of sermon on listening. And so I came up with a new title: Life Lessons on Listening, learned in the Livery. I thought it was kind of catchy, but it doesn't entirely capture where I'm likely to go, and I realized that it could have given some of you the misperception that I once drove a taxi, which I have not, although I imagine that might have been another fine way to learn the skills of listening. What I learned about listening came largely from my time spent with horses, and I'd like to share a little bit of that experience with you, in part to help to get to know me better. Now, a proclivity for horses is not something that I came by honestly, which is to say I did not inherit my love of horses from my parents, or even my curiosity about them. My father was a sailor, and he so would have appreciated this morning's hymn as I did. And my mother had traumatic memories of having been run under a low-hanging branch while riding in a car pulled by a mischievous Shetland pony on her way from her home to her Aunt Mabel and Uncle Billy's farm. My aunt and uncle had horses when I was growing up. My uncle rode in an actual sheriff's posse and later trained racehorses. I met my first newborn foal and sat on the back of a horse for the very first time in front of their little red barn in Allegan, Michigan one summer, very near the spot, incidentally, where my mother had experienced her pony trauma. I started taking lessons once I turned 8 at a public riding stable about a mile from my home in Chevy Chase, Maryland. We lived for a few years in a somewhat grand but very dilapidated house across the street from the immaculately groomed clay tennis courts at Columbia Country Club, the club, incidentally, where Brett Kavanaugh belongs, although no one seems to know who paid his initiation and membership fees, but I digress. We never could have afforded to join that club even then, but I could ride my old red Schwinn bicycle downhill to the public barn that was part of the National Capital Park and Planning Commission's property in Rock Creek Park. The bike ride home was uphill and torturous, but I kept going back to that barn because I'd fallen, metaphorically, head over heels with horses. I was very fortunate that after my parents separated and my father decided that I had had enough riding, thank you very much, my mother was willing to keep paying for my lessons. I felt a little guilty about that, though, so when I was 16, I started teaching there to help pay my own way. I continued to teach through high school and college and for a few years after, before moving up here to go to graduate school at Harvard Divinity School. So for many years, in some, I either took lessons or taught them, and I spent hours every week at that barn, not only riding horses, but also grooming them and feeding them and mucking out their stalls and tacking and untacking them and bathing them and even taking them to go swimming in good old Rock Creek. When I started to ride, I thought my job was to tell the horses what to do and make them listen to me. But that delusion did not last long. 100-pound kids, even those who can manage to ride a mile uphill several days a week, cannot make 900-pound horses do much of anything that the horses do not want to do. So I learned from horses about partnership, give and take, compromise, teamwork, persuasion, all of which depended mightily on learning to listen. And of course, horses don't communicate by spoken word, except for back then, Mr. Ed, and now there are a few others. So when I learned to listen to them, I learned to listen to the language they spoke with their bodies. I learned to tell when a horse was mad or stressed out or angry. I learned to tell when they were relaxed, happy, curious, and playful. I learned to tell the subtle difference between what could be mere stomping at flies and the kind of stomping that serves as prelude to a kick. The faster you learn to speak horse, the safer you remain. And I studied that language until it became intuitive, almost second nature. Now that was all a long time ago, and I left the horse world behind in large part to become a minister and begin working with people. But for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been volunteering for a few hours each week at Love Lane Therapeutic Riding Stable in Lincoln, Massachusetts, not too far from here. And I have to say, it's therapeutic for me as well as for the kids who are there. It's part exercise program, better than joining a gym. It's part service project, and it's part language immersion experience as I continue to practice listening to horses. I have developed a bit of a reputation there for working well with grumpy old mares. And I joke that it's because I'm becoming one myself. But truth be told, I get along equally well with grumpy old geldings too, and with the curious ones and the playful ones, and the eager and willing workhorses too. I just love them all. This past week I was working with several horses, one of whom is named Rocket. From his name you might guess that he is a fast horse. Maybe at one time he was, but no longer. He has been a consummate school horse for many, many years in various places, I'm sure, and having done his job well, he has retired to a part-time gig at a lovely barn in Lincoln. He is tired, and he has earned the right to be tired. Rocket lives a good life. He has a big stall that is kept clean, the door of which opens to a paddock of his own. He's got a water bucket that is kept clean and full, hay to munch on throughout the day, and grain at breakfast and dinner. He's got other horses nearby, his herd, and in exchange for all of that, all he has to do is walk or occasionally trot around a ring for a half hour or so, maybe twice a day. It's a pretty cushy job. You might think that he would always be happy and grateful, and I think that he mostly is, but when I saw him this week, he was a little grumpy. I went to check his girth. He pinned his ears back. He swished his tail. He shifted his weight on his back legs. None of this fazed me, but it all signaled to me how he was feeling. I get it. I read the language. I moved out of harm's way. I didn't take it personally. I finished what I was doing and started to get him walking, to get him warmed up for his lesson, but he was so slow. He was dragging. He did not want to be there doing that thing. He walked a few steps and he stopped and he dug in his heels. And the words of Thich Nhat Hanh came back to me. You don't interrupt. You don't argue, you just listen with compassion and help them suffer less. And so I looked at him and I said, hey, I get it. You probably wanted to be treated more like a being than like an object. You just want a little respect. And instead of trying to get him to move again right away, I took a few minutes just to connect, to scratch his neck, because I happen to know where and how Rocket likes to have his neck scratched, because I've had this conversation with him before. Neck scratching feels good, yes, but it's also part of horse language, the horse language of care and connection. Neck scratching and nibbling with their big upper lips, rubbing each other with those lips and breathing into each other's nostrils. And so I spent a few moments scratching the neck, the upper lip, holding my face down near his nose, feeling his warm breath on my cheeks, until he dropped his head, blew out a big breath through those big hairy nostrils, gave his head a big shake, and he was relaxed and ready to go, and there we were, thick as thieves, for the next half hour. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of another person, even a horse person. Now, where am I going with all of this? From the story of a horse named Rocket back to the parable of the rabbit. It feels like there is a sense in which you and John built this amazing thing over the last 31 years, and between COVID and John's retirement, it feels as if it has come crashing down. And some of you seem tired and disheartened and sad, and some of you are maybe even a little grumpy. And I get it. You don't even have to say it with your words. I get it. My role as an interim is akin to the role of the rabbit. It's not to rebuild that amazing thing that you have had. It is not to tell you what to do or how to feel or that you must get over what you're feeling. No, my job for now, at least, is to listen, to be present with you, to listen as you talk, to listen as you shout if you need to shout, to listen as you remember, as you laugh, and even as you cry. To listen as you talk about your temptations to hide your heads in the sand or to run away from this whole mess. If you were at the service in September, during which some of you helped me to unpack my backpack of interim tools, you might remember that one of those tools was a little mirror. I should have brought it with me again this morning. The mirror is a symbol for that piece of my work which is related to reflecting back to you what I am hearing as I listen. I carry that mirror to help congregations understand better what the work is that they have to do to prepare for the search for and the arrival of their next settled minister. For some congregations, what they see when I reflect back what they've said is that they're missing a clear sense of vision or mission. For some, what is missing is the lack of purposeful engagement with the world around them. For others, what is primarily needed is clarity around governance and how things get done, or attention to good process, or to conflict resolution. For most congregations, honestly, it's usually 2 or 3 of those things. As I've been listening to you, and granted it's still early in my intentional listening process, and there are many, many more of you with whom I want to connect, what I've heard so far has to do with the vital importance of community, connection, and care, and about the ways in which those networks of connection upon which you have relied have been disrupted. I'm sure that we will discover another thing or 2 or 3 that will require attention, and I'm willing to say that I'm beginning to get an inkling of what some of those might be. But for now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the number one job for us to do right now at this time in the interim season is to figure out new ways of connecting. I touched on this last week, but I'm lifting it up again this week because I think it is so very important. As was the case with Rocket and me this week, we first had to do the work of connecting before we could begin to do the other work that we needed to do. And so I say to you, if your main point of connection to this congregation was the now retired minister, then together we need to explore some other potential points of connection to the congregation. If your main point of connection was through some kind of activity or event that is no longer happening, either because of COVID-related restrictions or because of the lack of volunteer human resources to organize those events or activities, then together we need to begin to explore new ways of connecting with one another that can work right now, not later. The Zoom drop-in sessions that I've been holding these past 2 weeks have been great fun, and people have had a chance to connect with me and I with them, and they've had a chance to connect with each other, which is equally important. We're going to do a few more of those this week, and maybe we'll do some additional ones going out. But maybe we also need some outdoor drop-in sessions, some outdoor pizza parties, some pumpkin carving events, some apple picking outings, some fire pit circles, some small group walks along the bike trail or hikes in the woods, small gatherings in the sanctuary midweek for informal worship or vespers or quiet meditation. This is where we can use that innovative energy right now, right? Figuring out new ways to connect now and in the near-term future while we wait for some of the old ways that we had counted on but can no longer count on to become possible again. I don't have all the ideas, friends, but I bet if we put our minds to it together, we can come up with some great ones. In the meantime, I will keep listening to you, and hopefully you'll keep listening to me. and we'll all keep listening to one another. And when the time is right, you will begin to feel excited again and to make plans to build again, I promise you. Not from a place of weary, anxious impatience to get this darn interim thing over with and done, but from a place of genuinely renewed energy and joyful anticipation. And that will be when you know you are ready to move ahead. The closing words, like the opening words, are another poem, also from an anthology edited by James Cruz, this one titled Healing the Divide, Poems of Kindness and Connection. Have compassion for everyone you meet, even if they don't want it. What seems conceit, bad manners, or cynicism is always a sign of things no ears have heard, no eyes have seen. You do not know what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone. Go in peace, my friends, and return again in peace, or stay for some joyful organ music.